what does this look like alongside, being very practicing within a mosque that's very practicing, within a community that's very practicing, and typically not supportive of women in the workplace. I think we carried a lot of guilt unnecessarily. We carried a lot of guilt as a community, and that shaped us as well, and that shaped us as people in the workforce, I think, because we carried that guilt of something we hadn't done. We had a lot of, at that time, consultants coming from, they weren't London-based, they were coming from outside, they hadn't had exposure to people like me, and they think, could you speak English? Who is this person over here? And I really used to feel like people had extremely low expectations of me. I never understood the importance of representation in leadership until I found myself in a room full of people trying to have a conversation and they just could not hear what I was saying.
What I liked is when I asked you that first question about tell me a bit about your journey, most people just jump to their first role, but you actually started with your roots, what defines you, your identity. How much of that do you feel you've managed to keep in terms of your values?
If power in the UK has a colour, it's still predominantly white.
Only about 11% of board members identify as Black, Asian, or minority ethnic.
I can't change the colour of my skin. I'm not going to change that I'm a woman. I can't change what class I am, and I don't want to either. I'm very proud of who I am and where I come from.
New research shows that fewer than 5% of the UK's top leaders come from ethnic minorities.
The reality is, if you're Black, if you're Asian, or if you're an ethnic minority, it is harder for us.
Ferzanah, thank you so much for coming on Resilience. You've always been someone to me who, I don't know who Ferzanah was, there wasn't much there. And then suddenly one year it was like, bang, all the forums, all the conversations, all the LinkedIn posts, you're on everything. And I guess I wanted to hear a bit about your own career journey and if my perception of what I've just said, if that translates, or if you see it like that, where it was a bit under the radar and then suddenly everything happened. And I love to see it and I love it. And I just want to know from you, hearing a little bit about your career journey, your background, how you translate that.
Thank you, Aisha, first of all, for having me here. Really looking forward to our conversation and always enjoy kind of our chat. So yeah, fantastic. It's interesting how you framed that. I hadn't thought of it that way. When you put it that way, that suddenly you're everywhere, it makes me think, the 20 years of work that went before it. Yeah. It's all the preparation. So when you're out there, you're then in a good space because when people are saying, what are you about? You've got a good answer. You can say, here's what I've done. Here's what I'm about. Here's what I can do for you. Here's how I can serve you.
You mentioned 20 years and I've also looked into this and I'm like, wow, it really is. You're not underselling the 20 years. So talk me through a little bit about that whole journey. However far back you want to go, but that's brought you to this point.
So where it begins and ends for me is about kind of family, community, and kind of the people around me. So I guess that's where I'll start. Is my background is South Asian, Pakistani Muslim, born and brought up in East London, very traditional, fairly orthodox family, and that's been, that's part of my journey, that's informed my journey at every step, that's held me back and that's accelerated me at different times, and that's why I begin there, and that takes me to where I am today, is where everything I do is about what is the impact for residents, what is the impact from the community. But I always have that hat on of someone like my family who would typically be forgotten. What do they see in here? What's the impact for them? So that's kind of where I begin and end. So kind of started off in a fairly traditional family, what didn't value education for women, didn't encourage women to go into the workplace, very traditional, very kind of wary of women that are empowered and very quick to belittle. And so it was a really interesting journey then have to fight through that, to say, right, I want a good education. It's something I'm really passionate about, something I have ambition. I want to do something with my life. And that was like, really? And so I had to fight through that period of trying to get a good education for myself, get into the workplace and really fight to make my own choices, what I wear, the kind of person I am, being able to be authentic, who I married, where I ended up working. So a career in my family is like, for women, be a teacher. That's it. And I was like, I probably would have loved being a teacher, but because I've been told, that's a good career, it's like I would never have gone down that path. That's the only thing I didn't want to do. And so it was all throughout, it informed and kind of challenged me, that background, right into my workplace. So my first full-time role after I graduated was in the civil service. Really interesting because I came in, I think, just as the civil service was changing, kind of coming out of the old boys club and very traditional and very extremely hierarchical. And then from that moving into a more modern organisation. So that was around 2000, so a really interesting time to join. probably really good time for me because they were just starting to have those conversations about, what does a diverse workforce look like? What does, who are those new faces that are coming in? So really interesting. So I spent about 8 or 9 years there, really enjoyed it. Really
Is this with the civil service?
With the civil service.
Yes.
I really enjoyed being a small fish in a big pond because you learn so much. You can move around, you can see all the kind of politics and the mechanics of a big organisation. So it's really good. I suppose towards the end of that 10 years, having worked in what's now called the Office of the Public Guardian and the kind of banking function, all those elements, I really started to feel like, yes, we're doing good things for people, but we're so far away. What does this mean for the likes of my community? If I was to tell my parents what I did, they just couldn't get their head around what is it that you actually do. And so I was really interested in moving closer to kind of working in a local authority and kind of in East London. And I landed kind of on a lower grade and a sideways move in Newham. And again, so I did 10 years there and again, really enjoyed it, learned an amazing amount in a very dynamic organisation that was experiencing internally a massive change, but externally massive change. So you're seeing the borough change in a scale, and what a privilege it was. Despite all the challenges, what a privilege it was to work in an organisation and be part of that change and to see that change happen, the learning. So to work, a year with members, you get to grips with all the politics and kind of spend a couple of years in performance, strategy, kind of policy work. It gives you such a powerful grounding across what a local authority does and what its purpose is. And then to spend a couple of years I got to work on the Olympic team. That was like an amazing experience. So, a year and a half working on their 2012 team.
And in Newham as well, exactly where it's at.
Getting out in the park, working on the stadium project, seeing all the politics and the scandal around that. You felt you were right in the middle of things. And then a couple of years in transformation teams. If you look at the experience I gained to bring with me, real foundational at Newham. So really grateful. Despite all the kind of interesting challenges that I had there, really. And then when I was ready to move from there, I moved into Redbridge just thinking, I always wanted to, it's such a sad ambition, I always wanted to work for Redbridge because I wanted to serve the community I live in.
Because you live in the same borough.
Because I live in the borough, so I thought, I did so much for another borough. What would that look like doing it for my own borough? What would that feel like? And it's just the immense satisfaction you get, one, connecting with the people you serve, and two, seeing the impact of what you do has been, my 5 or 6 years at Redbridge have been amazing. I've loved working there. It's quite a humble organisation. I think if you come in from outside new, compared to many places where you find it very friendly. And so that's given me kind of access to people. It's meant that I'm not scared to try new things. Yeah. So I've been given that freedom, real freedom to grow, and that's where my growth has been accelerated a little bit to my current position. I feel like I've got the best title ever.
You have?
I love the title, Head of Intelligence, Insights and Change, and my director's been saying, I'm not sure about the title, we need to change it. I think, I don't want to change it. I don't want to change it. Still, if I was to tell my mum what I do, she'd still be thinking, what is it that you do all these years later? But
who cares? It sounds great.
Yeah, it sounds great. It sounds like I work for, MI5 or something. But it's been a really interesting space because when you're working in kind of more policy, strategy, you're strategizing and you're kind of guiding other people to what they do out there. But actually, for instance, when I did a lot of work around equalities and something I'm very passionate about, inequality and disproportionality, but you're doing the kind of the lip service. But then when you're moving into more operational work, so you're delivering performance, you're delivering data, you're delivering change, you then get the opportunity to implement some of those ideas in real life. And that's the bit that I thought, this is such an amazing opportunity, not just to talk about, in disproportionality, let's pull the data and see where it's hitting. Right now we can do something. We're doing a change program. Let's not do just a dry change program. Let's make every element of it building inequality and inclusiveness. And so you get a real opportunity to implement some of the things you care about. So for me, it's it's about connecting with the grassroots. It's about community and developing the third sector. It's about how can you maximise social value. It's about inclusion. It's all those different elements, accessibility that I really cared about. Now I've got a chance to do something about them. So if you're a data person, typically you're sitting there thinking, what's this got to do with me? But if you're in my team, you better work out what it's got to do with you. So you're
I love it.
You're going to be understanding what your contribution to all those things are, and you're going to be active in that. And that's I think, a really unique take. I haven't seen that in many places. To be able to have that chance to get that background and apply it in that space is something really...
I mean, look,
really
what you've picked up on, I have so many questions, and I'm thinking, right, where do I start now? Every point at which you're talking, I'm kind of, right, got to remember this. So now I'm filled with questions. But the first, I suppose, is I love your ability to remain very humble, very, the way you present yourself, it just makes everyone feel comfortable. You have a real sense of a really nice aura about you, I think. But at the same time, there's little things that you say, and I'm like, oh, she's quite fierce under all of that. And I think there's a part of that stems all the way back to when you spoke about your roots and how it all started, and you kind of, you know, went against all assumptions, and, you know, getting a job in civil service as one of your first roles. That takes something from you to do that, to kind of not go with standard expectations. What was it that inspired that in you? Is it as individual? Is it something that just makes you Ferzanah, that you've always held with yourself? That side of just constantly pushing yourself to be different, to do more, and
outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Where does that come from?
You're always. I suppose probably a couple of things. So there's one thing that drives me really, really. There's 2 or 3 things that really, really drive me. So one of them is a sense of fairness. That makes me so mad.
A sense of
fairness. So when I see something that's unfair or wrong, that makes me so mad. I can't feel complacent about that. So when I see something out there that something needs to be done, I feel like you've been put in a position you can actually do something. So in my organisation, I've got a bit of a reputation for getting on the soapbox. But when you get me going, I'm just like, no, we have to do something. No, this isn't right. No, you've got to look at it a different way. So there's an element of, you know, a sense of not just letting unfairness go. I think that's always driven me. Another element is just a sense of just privilege at the position I'm in. So my mum comes from a background, she lost her parents when she was quite young. She never learned to read and write. She taught herself to read and write when she came here. So she really valued education. She really valued that her children have that education, and she felt that that's what would get them somewhere in life, that's what would protect them, that's what would give them opportunity. And so I saw that, but I also, when I was quite young, I spent a lot of time in Pakistan, and I would really see how other people live, but also what it meant for people not to have an education, to not have that opportunity that was right kind of there for me. So a really, really seminal conversation for me in my life was when I was about 17 in Pakistan. I was talking to staying in my grandparents' village and just going out, chatting to people, having a chat with a young girl, and she was asking me about myself, and I said, I'll go to college, I've just started university, really looking forward to it. And she was like, you're so lucky. I went to college, I went to school, and my teacher wasn't very good, and we all failed, and my parents said, well, that's enough, we're not paying anymore, you're staying at home. And I went, oh. So it's not just like, and I was like one of the last years that were grant funded, no fees, had it so good. And I thought, she could have been as clever as me, better than me, but she doesn't. And it just stuck in my head that you've got this chance that so many other people haven't had. Don't waste it. And so I've always kind of like grabbed that privilege and said, you have a voice if others don't.
Put that fire in you.
Yeah, it put that fire in me that you're so lucky. Don't ever sit there thinking, poor me, what about me? I haven't got this. And I never have been able to put myself in that position of, I haven't got this and this is too hard. Because I just thought you're so lucky. And then the other thing, I don't know what that drive is. I don't know if we had, because I see it in my sisters as well, just to think we want to do everything.
Are you all similar?
We're all quite independent, quite driven, quite strong-minded. And I think all of our husbands suffer because of it. Cause
they love it, really.
Because they love it, because there's that kind of softness and can you help me and can you do this? It's just not really
damsel in distress.
Yeah, we're not damsel in distress. And I think because we were raised in a family of women and it was very... And if you want it, sort it out yourself. There's no princesses here. So it's very interesting having that background. I'm married into a family of like lots of men, brothers, uncles, and to then suddenly have that princess treatment. I was like, I've never had this before, because it's just not who we are. Yeah. And so we've all got this like. We went last year for the first time together on holiday in Istanbul, and we squabbled like cats and dogs. But we went for the first time. It was hilarious because there was no like, let's rest and enjoy this. It was like, right, itinerary. How much things can we pack into a day? And my poor mum with her arthritis got dragged across the whole of Istanbul. But we did and saw everything, because we were just like next, because we're all quite alpha, we're all quite organised. We'll get our spreadsheets out, we'll have our lists, we'll have our costs, and usually you get one of them in a family. There's like 4 of us.
Madness. I want to be part of that holiday next time. Sounds amazing.
You're fighting with us. Or you won't miss anything.
What I liked is when I asked you that first question about tell me a bit about your journey, most people just jump to their first role. But you actually started with your roots, what defines you, your identity. How much of that do you feel you've managed to keep in terms of your values? And you mentioned community, you mentioned impact, and these are obviously core things that are really important to you. Do you feel over the years, as you progressed, it's gotten easier to keep that with you, or do you feel it's gotten harder?
That's a good question, because this is something, having moved into the role I am, this is a good place to kind of
Test it out. Yeah.
Test that question out. So one of the things that I found really difficult in the beginning of my career was, although I didn't recognise it at the time, was the lack of representation. So I didn't see anyone like me, particularly in the civil service. You might find other Muslims, but they weren't women with children. You might find other women with children, but they weren't Muslims. So there was like these two things that I had to balance along my work life that I just couldn't see anyone else doing anywhere in my life that would help me to understand, how do I do this? It was really interesting. I had 3 kids in the civil service. By the time I was in UM, I had 5.
My goodness. We haven't even touched on the kids yet. I mean, we're going to come on to this. So we've got 5 kids now.
There's 5 kids now. So there was this real thing. There's this real thing of, what does this look like alongside, being very practicing within a mosque that's very practicing, within a community that's very practicing, and typically not supportive of women in the workplace, or kind of going, why do you need to work? You should be at home with your children. And not thinking that, people regularly saying that to me in the early years of my career, and not having the confidence always to push back. And then questioning myself, am I not a good person if I've left my kids and I'm in the workplace? And so where you could be, you're wasting energy, you're wasting kind of mental
space,
kind of bandwidth on these things that you're not about to stop working. So why are you wasting it? But I didn't see anyone to help me navigate those conversations. And that was, one of the things I didn't do early on. I left till much later, was a mentor. And the reason I didn't was because I could not see anyone that was in that space that would help me to navigate those questions. And it took up a good 15 plus years of my career agonising over those questions. What a waste of energy and time at the time that really held me back. And at some point I had to make a decision on, I'm part of this world, I'm part of this workforce, I'm not going to hold back. I'm just going to get on with it now. But really, really, it's one of the things I'm grateful for. I think I did hold on to my authentic self throughout, but I think part of that was I couldn't not. I'm not a person that holds back. I'm not a person that's shy or retiring or is going to present a face, because you just can't. And so it just came through naturally. And it was an interesting time, because I started my career 9/11. That's when I started my career. So the first year I was in civil service was when 9/11 happened. And so that was the background throughout the whole of my experience in civil service, and well into my experience of NUM, was framed with all of the years that went on, and that's what you get from people. That's kind of I give that context of, not without purposes. That's the context within which people relate to you. So if they haven't been around people like you, especially as you move into management, that's the context. So you don't get what do you think of that? Why do you wear a hijab? Oh, is your husband making you wear? All the nonsense you've heard, particularly in the early years, but things that wouldn't have been on people's radars. They might have been oblivious if it hadn't been. So that was the early context, and that really, really was on my mind a lot in the early years. All those things that happened. And so within that context, there was an element as well of representing your faith and your background. And so you're on your best behaviour, you're answering people's questions, you are trying to dispel myths, you're doing all of that stuff, which is a whole nother, now young people talk about mental load. They say, that within the context of Black Lives Matter, they say, it's not my job to educate you. We didn't do that. We didn't say something. We kind of went, how can I answer this so it comes out well, kind of thing.
We took that responsibility almost.
We took that responsibility on ourselves. And I think we carried a lot of guilt unnecessarily. We carried a lot of guilt as a community, and that shaped us as well, and that shaped us as people in the workforce, I think, because we carried that guilt of something we hadn't done. But fingers were pointed at us as a community, so it's really interesting. I got asked once, so are you a kind of fifth columnist? And I thought, I don't know what fifth columnist... At that age, at that time, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what to say.
Goodness.
So that kind of stupid question, ridiculous question. So, but I felt like through all of that, I was able to stay authentic. And because I was able to stay authentic, I could connect with people on an honest level, and that meant I built good relationships, and those relationships stood me in good stead. And because that is part of how I deliver with people across the organisation. It's what I'm known for wherever I've worked. That I get to know everyone, and it makes work really fun as well. You get to know everyone, you get to enjoy people's company. Yeah. So I felt like I could be authentic throughout my career, despite those challenges, both as a South Asian, as a Pakistani Muslim, and as a Muslimah, and as a woman, and other elements of your identity. I think there wasn't an element that I ever really... The only element that I did feel I had to suppress for a long time was being a mother.
Wow.
That was interesting. So I had 3 children in civil service, three small children, really, really kind of tight ship to manage with, working in central London, no hybrid working, no online working. It was all you got to get in there, with their kind of looking after 3 kids, their schooling, having a strong network around you. But the one thing I always felt strongly was you would, at that time, so we're talking 20 plus years ago now, at that time is you will not be taken seriously in the workplace if you're seen as a young mother. You know, you're not someone that could be reliable, could be given opportunities, that will go off at any time. You know, you might have another baby, your children might get sick. And so it's a part of myself I did not bring to work. I hid, I didn't talk about. I had my kids and I went straight back to work, straight in, you know.
My goodness, so you're working in civil service, you've got 3 children, what kind of ages?
So at that time, I had them in the civil service. So by the time I left, they were around, so my 3 then were they're all under 5, 3 under 5.
So you've got 3 under 5, and I mean, they get ill, all of those things. And you probably felt you're just having to work through all of that. And not raise it, not mention it.
Keep it out the workplace.
That's a lot.
And I think it did make a difference. So I was seen as, so I remember at that time they were talking to managers about, you know, talk to your staff who you think should have a look at the Fast Stream, their grad programme. And I remember at the time being approached and said, Ferzanah, you'd be great for this. And I just had my oldest, who was very small then, she's grown up girl now, she's very small then. And I thought to myself, Fast Stream is quite intense, it'll take me all over the country. I've just had my little girl, I'm all about her now. And so I turned it down, but I remember there was another young woman in my team. She was a single mum of a young girl, and she said, why did no one ask me? And so when someone said, oh, you've got kids. So
wow.
But they had seen her in a different way, and it really made me, and it upset a lot of people, but it really made me realise actually there's something in it. And I think the world's shifted, because a lot of those people at that time who were very laddish, it was lad culture, there was a last lad culture, they are now parents, and they're all about, oh, I've got to get home on time, or I've got to drop mine off at nursery, I won't be in at this time. And I'm thinking, when I had kids, you guys were very dismissive. And now, because the world shifted, and part of that, I was very lucky, my first manager at Redbridge, Edith Galliot, who you know, she's wonderful, she's at Waltham Forest now, I love her to bits. She was very authentic in herself as a mother, so she would say to me, family first, and she would say,
makes such a difference.
Massive difference. And she would say, and she would model it, she'd say, right, today I'm going to be a bit late, my child's not well, or I'm going to work from home today, my child's not well. And she made it okay to be able to do that, because she still maintained a level of competence. She didn't disrupt service delivery, she managed it all. But what it meant was I could say to her, I've got an appointment today, I'm going to struggle, and she'd say, I know you're on top of your work, it's fine. And so it's a different culture now where you can be authentic as a parent. And my younger two benefit from that. My older ones didn't. My older ones were I think they missed a lot, because, you know, a lot of their stuff at school I'd send their grandma, their dad or someone else. Now I missed, and for me to be there was like a big celebration. Wow, mum's here. You could see their faces. Yeah. It was a big deal for them. And I think I'm grateful the world's moved on, and other mums that have to experience that. But it was a very different world. That's a bit I think I did leave.
Yeah.
Shut the door on. But the rest, you know, being a Muslim in the world, because you can't hide those things. They're there. So you might as well own them, celebrate them. I'd say leverage them. You stand out. Yeah. In a room full of kind of middle-aged white men, you stand out. So leverage that to your benefit.
Why should that be a bad thing?
Give them a new point of view. And certainly I think many times I've been in a room and listened to a conversation and said, no, I know the people out there. I'm one of the people out there. This isn't landing. And that gave me really interesting insight into. I never understood the importance of representation in leadership until I found myself in a room full of people trying to have a conversation, and they just could not hear what I was saying. And it took me a while to understand, okay, different language, different frames of reference, different contexts, they just do not get what I'm saying. And so it's the kind of meeting in the middle, bringing them towards you, but also understanding the language, presenting the evidence, all of that then gets them saying. So there were themes that I was really passionate about. And one of them was always about people with no recourse, because I've grown up seeing a whole community, Redbridge, as with its neighbouring boroughs, there's high numbers of people with no recourse that are just hidden away. And if you've never seen that, you don't understand what that means. You know, other than the kind of formal legal processes, you don't know what that means for children, women, men, families, communities on the ground.
It's like an unseen community, isn't it? But it's big.
And the impact of it's big. So, like, for an example, when I would pick up my girls from school, one of the things I found really interesting was I found it really hard to make connections with other mums, partly because I was never there. I'd go to pick up one of my kids, and the teachers would be saying to the kids, who's this woman coming to kids? I'm like, it's her mum. Yeah. Because they'd see me a couple of times a year. And I did make some friends, but one of the things I found hard was a lot of the mums didn't want to make friends because they had indeterminate status. They were scared to talk about themselves. They weren't laying down roots. They didn't know what was going to happen with them, where they would end up. So it means it shifts the balance of your community. So there are people not accessing vaccination, not accessing proper healthcare. There are people who, when something goes wrong, they put a lid on it. If a crime is committed against you, you're not going to report it. So there's a host of things happening in your communities. You're not seeing that. But if you're living in the middle of it, if you're making friends with them, if they're your neighbours, you are seeing it. So it's really interesting to be living in the midst of it, but your policy is not reflecting that. And that was something I think shifted in COVID. Thousands of people that actually we do need to reach now. And so that shifted. But before then,
COVID shifted a lot of things, didn't it? I feel like COVID moved us 10 steps forward in managing work around childcare commitments and that being okay to an extent.
I think so, but I think it depends where you are.
True.
So a common refrain I often hear is when someone says, I can't come in at that time, childcare. Well, you had childcare before COVID. Why do you think that?
Wow.
So I hear that in different places. So I think it's, so in my team, I'm a team of, it's a very unique PMO. So I've got my performance team, my data team, and my PMO, who I love to bits. My PMO is a whole team of Asian women, led by an Asian woman. I've never seen a PMO like that. So I've always said, we have to do a good job. We have to do a good job where we're shutting doors for other people.
Shine a light, yeah.
So we have to do a good job because we have to show people that this is, not a less than, we're as good as anyone. But because you've got a whole team, they've got childcare responsibilities, they've got responsibilities towards elders and others. I've always made it clear, I'm not going to micromanage. You show me you're delivering, I'm not going to micromanage. And that means that it gives them space to manage their lives alongside their work, and they deliver, and they go over and above for me. But not everywhere is going to give you that space where they'll say, well, the meeting's at 8:30, so you're going to be there. Or the meeting's at 4 o'clock. Childcare's, you sort out your childcare.
Yeah.
Whereas I've said, put it in your diaries, we'll work around it, regular meetings will work around it. Let's give ourselves space to live and breathe so that we're not in it for 6 months and then burn out. We're in it for the long haul to do good things.
But isn't it amazing how the more you trust, the more you enable your team, the better they work as well. It actually strengthens their delivery rather than this 9 to 5 time bound and focus on actions and what they're delivering every second of the day. To just delegate, leave them to it, trust them, work things through at their own pace in their own time. So long as the deadline's met, it doesn't really matter what time they use to meet that. I find it a really
odd concept,
old way of working and style. And I feel like if there's one thing we should take now, it is the learning of, as a leader, enabling our teams, isn't it? And
100%. And it speaks to, so I think you're a lot like me, a real doer. You've got to see, you've got to have tangible impact, you've got to change things, you've got to move things. And so if you're someone who's a real doer, to shift into the leadership space and to stop being in control of all the doing, it's quite a big mental shift. But at the same time, as that doer, as a competent doer, you don't want to be micromanaged. So you know what good and bad leadership looks like for you as a starting point. You don't want to micromanage, you want to empower, to give people freedom, all of that. I got to see what having that freedom looked like under kind of Edith, and we had Andy McDonald as our chief exec, and they kind of went, go and do what's right. And I had a wonderful head of HR, Louise Sell, brilliant person. And Louise used to say, if it's sensible, if it's compassionate, you don't need permission. Just get on with it. I love
that.
And that gave us so much freedom and accelerated growth. And having seen what that could look like now means for my team, I can say, right, if you've got a good idea, start developing it, start working on it. Don't sit there thinking, oh, we've got permission, we need organised permission. We'll get all of that. If the idea is good, let's get started. And give people that freedom and let them grow and let them explore.
You mentioned the term a doer. We're doers. There's a common theme I found amongst Black, Asian, minority, ethnic individuals where they're doers. Why do you think that is, that we're known as doers, and to what extent does that impact us as them being seen as leaders?
Leaders, strategic thinkers, as the visionaries and shapers rather than the doers. Two things I'm thinking about. So one is having that language, that frame of reference, that kind of, because when you start in your career, you do start as doers. And then you move into the thinking space, and we don't always have the language. So one of the things I was thinking about was a pipeline into kind of employment. And you see these pipelines where you get masses of people from different backgrounds applying, and they get through, but they fall down at interview. So I was thinking, what is it? What is it about that connects, the language, the terminology, being able to articulate yourself? And is there a gap there? Because you're straddling multiple. It's multiple cultures, multiple languages. You're switching languages in your head and in your community all the time, into an environment that's very expert in this one space, in this one terminology, around this profession. And the other thing I think about is a conversation I think back to. I had a colleague, and she says to me, Ferzanah, I've got like X number of degrees, X number of diplomas, but no one's promoted me. I remember sitting in a kind of a safe space conversation with black and Asian people, and there was a black man that said, I've got like 12 degrees, which is, I can't get my head around.
12?
He's like, I've got like 12 degrees, but I'm still in this role.
Wow.
And it really made, and the conversation I had with her was, you know, I'm in the same boat, went out and got my master's in my own time, nearly killed myself doing it, but it was never about the masters, it was about how you use it. So the bit that people don't realise, you can do all the projects, do all the degrees, but it's not about ticking the box. The connections, it's the relationships, it's being seen, it's being visible, it's about your sponsors, it's all the soft stuff. And I wonder if a lot of the black and Asian and minority ethnic people in the workplace are so focused on the right steps that they haven't had the time to work on the soft stuff. So when I was doing my masters, where I really used it was not, here's the degree, forget about that. There's lots of people in very senior posts with that, lots of masters and degrees. It was every time I had an assignment, I'd go and sit down with a director and say, you're going to be my interview subject. And so you're building relationships, you're hearing what they need, you're kind of building connection. Every time I've completed an assignment, I've gone, right, this director over here that deals with risk, here's my assignment. It might be rubbish, throw it in the bin and ignore it, but it might be something useful in there. And so here's one on what I think, leadership and risk in this organisation. Here you go. And so every time I did something, I'd get it in front of people. So the mistake people make, they do the work and they shut the lid on it.
That's amazing that you had that insight, because I do naturally find we're not very good at that whole networking. You mentioned we're in our little space and getting on with what we're doing and don't necessarily step back to look at the whole, very much on the dance floor, not on the balcony, that kind of thing. Where does that come from? Because do you observe people and then you recognise this is what needs to come in, this is what I'm missing? Or is it something you learn as you go? Or is it's either there or it isn't?
You learn as you go. I'm thinking, where did the penny drop that it wasn't enough to sit there and just kind of
tick the boxes?
And just think, I've done a really good job, someone's going to promote me now. And I thought, and it was really watching some interesting, Neom had some really interesting people. Really, really interesting characters, and I love people watching. So you kind of, in the meeting, as much as I'm paying attention to what's happening, I'm watching the characters, because that kind of, and that's part of it. That's like a skill set, understanding, kind of reading the room, understanding what you should and shouldn't say. And that's, again, sometimes a skill people lack as they go up. They can be very blunt, or they can, be a bit of a blunt instrument. I think it came by accident, because I was so passionate about the equalities work I was doing that all the time, the big thing I realised was it wasn't on people's radars. It wasn't on people's radars, they didn't understand it, they didn't know about it, and so for me I had to really push to get it in front of people all the time. But inadvertently in doing that, it got me in front of people all the time. So I went to every Pan London thing, I was like, I have to get in there, I have to learn, I have to talk about what we're doing, you have to make people understand this is important. But inadvertently, I was there talking about it really passionately, and people going, right, let's go and have a chat with Ferzanah. And so it was inadvertent, but then I realised, actually, those conversations across London, those conversations shoving in the face of people across my organisation is getting me out there. So it was kind of accidental, but it made me realise that it's not enough to do the job in the corner and hope for the best. You have to get in front of people, and you have to really, really... So it was I also got lucky with, I had a couple of good sponsors, and at that time I didn't know what a good sponsor was. There's a wonderful lady at Neom called Norma, who she'd say, oh, Ferzanah can do that for you. And people say, that small little lady, lady with the hijab.
With the hijab, the only definition.
I think people like that, we had a lot of, at that time, consultants coming from they weren't London based, they were coming from outside, they hadn't had exposure to people like me, and they think, could you speak English? Who is this person over here? And I really used to feel like people had extremely low expectations of me, when they, in the beginning. And so I had a few good sponsors that would say, yeah, Ferzanah can do that. Right, Ferzanah, go and have a look at that project. So she was the one that said, Ferzanah, go and have a look at what the Neom 2020 team, you know a bit about project management, put some project management principles in. And they just grabbed me and kept me up there, kept me with the team for the next year. How does
that land with you? Because it's almost, what you're almost saying is, it took someone that's already up there, that maybe doesn't represent the community, to champion you, for people to believe you can do it, rather than people just believed in you because you're Ferzanah, if that makes sense. It was because that person on the leadership table said she can do it.
It shows you the value of allyship and good sponsors, and it shows me the value of that. it made me understand that part of leadership is being a good sponsor for others. So it's bringing that talent through, it's opening doors, it's giving people a chance and putting them out in front of people. And I see that as part of my role as a leader for my team was also being a good sponsor for them. But at the time, it used to drive me mad. So I didn't recognise her as a sponsor. I was just like, thank God she can see what I can do. She puts me forward. But it would drive me mad that people could not see beyond. And I've got quite a loud personality sometimes, quite out there sometimes, and that made it a bit easier for me to be able to, for them to be able to see past the hijab and see Ferzanah. Over time, it took a little bit of time, but it used to drive me mad that you're having a conversation over there about literature and culture, and I'm interested in those things, but you're asking me about, how to cook a curry, but you're not going to ask me about. And it used to drive me mad. I was like, why do you?
I'm getting annoyed just listening to you.
But then it doesn't last, because the more people get to know you, they get to know the different aspects and connect with you, and they get to see, you're interested in the same things with them. But I had a lot of that over many years, and I'm lucky now. I don't get that. It was really interesting. I came to Redbridge and I didn't have that experience. Like, people, apart from once or twice, they'd be like, "Where's your manager?" Like, no, I can deal with you. No, we'll wait for your manager. No, I will deal with you. I can do this work. It's fine. But very rare. And I still get now and again with external contractors coming. Who's this person? Like, someone that's wandered up the street.
Even now.
A little bit. But part of what helps me in that, I was quite lucky in civil service. I did it was called at the time a BAME leadership short course. And one of the things that, you don't remember all of it, but you take away one or two key things. And one of the things I took away from there was it's your job and your responsibility to manage your brand. You walk into a room and you decide how people see you. And so one of the things I learned from that was, when I walk into a room, I control the energy. I walk into a room with a big smile. Hi, how are you? It's not waiting for someone to say, you bring that sunshine into a room, that big energy into a room. You go, right, how are you doing? Hi.
I love that.
Who are you?
And I see that in you a lot as well. Whenever I come across you at board forums or anything like that, I'm like, yeah, she's got it. She's just got this burst of energy. And it translates across the room, doesn't it? It resonates. So
you have to, and that's your way of taking control. And it was really hard for me as well, because I don't like to shake hands. So I'm not going to walk into a room and start shaking hands. So what is my other way of walking into a room and establishing, not superiority, not control, but establishing that I'm here to play. I'm here to be part of this room. I'm here to be part of this conversation. I'm here to work with you on really good terms. Let's start in a really good way and do good things. And I don't want to come to the firm handshake. So what is my way of doing that? So, and I was really lucky I had someone prompt that question and help me think that through. And the brand thing is really interesting as well, because I had a conversation around brand with someone who was mentoring. And the way he saw it was brand was almost a dirty word, because it's very not manipulative, a little bit manipulative, but it's very
feels a bit superficial almost.
Superficial, very kind of corporate. And I said, no, brand is not about you being out there with your card. Brand is telling people how you're going to serve them.
What you represent.
And it's saying, this is how I can serve you and help you. So if my brand is quite accessible and it's about equalities, people know I can go and talk to Ferzanah and she'll help me understand this issue around this space. If my brand is about really sharp data and program management, they know they can come to me and get a reliable product, trust it with their eyes closed. So it's not about how I come across as the big
perception.
Ego. It's about, this is how I'm here to serve you in the world. And that really shifted his thinking, but it's always been because I've not been really controlled about my brand. It's been quite organic. But now as time goes on, I know I need to think more carefully about that, because there is that element of trusting you, trusting your product, and people have to have that trust. So when we've just delivered our Redbridge census dashboard, and people in the organisation, when they look at that, it has to be absolutely the single version of the truth. We are all going to work, we're all going to rely on it. The analysis on it is going to help us all. So there has to be not just an element of this, softer kind of policy qualities world. There has to be this real kind of, this is it. And so you shift your brand a little bit, not because you want to be known as that, but because what you're offering and giving out in the world has to be fit for purpose.
I love hearing it. And it almost reminded me of the time in a previous organisation where I worked. I walked through and people were kind of standing up to say hello, and I found it really weird, like, okay. And they thought I was the one hijabi counsellor that existed for the organisation. So they got me completely wrong, because obviously we both wear hijabs, even though we're completely different race. We look completely different.
I love that.
They just thought I must be that counsellor.
Take advantage.
So they're like, hello, counsellor, and I was, when it hit me, that they're not just standing up because, wow, I've really made it. They thought I was someone completely different. I was like, oh no, that's not me. But actually, you're right. You have shifted yourself from being the hijabi to being Ferzanah. Yeah. And people now talk about Ferzanah, and we know what you represent. No, honestly, I don't know why you're laughing. I've spoken to a lot of people, and they're like, oh, do you know Ferzanah in Redbridge? Oh, and you've done it. Like, when you're talking about your brand, it shines. It definitely comes across.
It really is. It's almost embarrassing to say the word brand because it's like you're creating a construct.
Yeah.
But it's not about that. It's about letting people know what you're here to do for them, how they can come and connect with you, how they can work with you, how you can do things together.
It's funny, isn't it? Because we do have something about integrity that we hold very dear to us, and almost in a way that it works to our disadvantage. So in the way that you're kind of saying, people think of brand as quite a manipulative thing, or I felt sometimes like that about networking. So networking is one of those things where you're only doing it in the hope that you'll get something from someone. So I've kind of avoided networking, but that's not true. Having a brand is a skill. Being able to network, it's a skill.
Yeah, if you're not that comfortable in that space, it's really hard. So getting comfortable in that space, and then again, it's not about what is in it for me. It's about there's a greater good here. We're all working. So, for instance, we met at so Ifan Suleiman runs with his kind of colleagues runs the
MIP.
The MIP, Muslims in Public Pride. And for me there, it wasn't about what we get out of it. And for young people, you know what, good for you, try and get as much as you can. But it was like, we could do so much good here. Let's connect.
So true.
Let's connect so that we can really support each other, really do good things for the wider
And that really is what networking is.
Yeah.
And I think there's something there about when we don't understand it, when we're not familiar to it, we have to learn it as we go and come to our own judgments. And that's quite risky because we haven't been brought up in a natural space of leadership and directors in our network and chief execs, coming around for dinners and things like it's just far from it, So we're having to work this out as we go. So one of the things I wanted to ask is, you started saying, it's taken 20 years to get to this point. If you're able to go back, would you do it differently so it moved faster? Or do you feel, actually, no, that was my pace and it worked because it got me to where I am today in the way I want to represent?
I wouldn't change it because where I was got me to where I was now. And when it was slow, it was right for me then.
Yes.
What I would do differently is there's lessons I'd extract that I'd say that I didn't need to do like that. So, for example, when I first started out, I applied at an admin level. All of my peers that were graduating applied at the executive level.
Wow.
But then within 6 months, I was at the executive level. I said, and so I was kind of placed in executive, and I said, this is not right. These people have been here longer than me, and it's their turn. And that happened on many occasions where I went in at a much lower level or had lower expectations of myself than I should have. So if I did it again, I'd have much higher expectations of myself. I just say apply higher every time, because there was not a thing that I was asked to do or a job I applied for that I never got. Wow. There was never a thing that I was asked, and that's one of the things that's bolstered my confidence and helped me get away from imposter syndrome quite well. And it's one thing I always say to women around me is, when were you asked to do something and you couldn't do it or you failed? Pretty much every time. So what makes you think that the thing you're doing now you can't do it? You will ask for the help. You'll go and find a way. So that was interesting. It was always, aiming higher and having more confidence in myself at the beginning. The bit where in the civil service was a lot slower, that was right for me because I had 3 kids under 10. So to not go at pace was right for me because I was really, really got to enjoy when they were small. I'd go home at 4 every day. I'd have that evening with them. Mentally, I was, not checked out.
Yeah.
In a way that you might complain now that, Ferzanah, where's your mind? Because we're carrying so much now. So I was really present. And it's not just the time, it's being present with them. And in the moment, then I got to do that. But I don't think there's elements I would have gone back and done differently. I think what I did then got me to where I am now. And so, and the learning along the way is what keeps you humble, and the connections you build across the grassroots is what, like the way I know local gov inside out, I wouldn't have known it.
Yes, so true. I always feel like that. Working your way up and through gives you a level of insight that a leader that just jumps straight in at the top would never have.
And it's good that, you need that strategic thinking, you need that high level being on the balcony, but to kind of connect that with real understanding across the organisation, how powerful does that become? How much value does that give you? So it's really interesting. So I wouldn't necessarily have gone and done it differently because it gave me space in the early years to be a good mum, to invest in my kind of family and all of that. And then in the later years, when the time came to, I've got 2 young ones even now. I've got 2 that are still in primary, and so it's still a little bit of, I've still got
I don't know how you do it. I didn't even know you've still got kids in primary, by the way.
So I've got various levels of trying to sort out uni applications, college applications.
It's all these milestones, isn't it?
All sorts happening all the time. But it just, so I wouldn't do it differently. But I would learn from it, and I would hope to share those kind of lessons. And the other thing I wouldn't do is hold on to all that guilt and that self-doubt of, are you a good Muslim because you're leaving your children and going to work, you're in an environment with other men and having to navigate, I don't want to shake hands, I don't want to get in a car with you, I can't be in a room of my own with you. All these kinds of things are like, and you're still in the workplace, so what was the point?
It's so true.
That's my gift I would give to other young women, is just let go of all of that, get on with it. Don't worry about all of that.
It's amazing how much we carry. And the word guilt and how much it comes up. I've found more often for a woman as well. Just over so many different things we just carry, and it takes so much mental...
And recognising it's not just Muslim women, a lot of, all the other women in the workplace are carrying similar kinds of guilt about leaving their children, all sorts of other stuff. Many of them are. And so recognising that and going, you know what, let's just put this to one side now. And
it's hard, isn't it? Because that care duty goes from the children to, as you move through our generations, to the parents, and it's a lot.
It's not. And this is one of the things I reflected on, that as Muslim women in the workplace, I listen to these really vocal young men who talk about you're all greedy for money, you should be at home. Muslim women in the workplace do not earn lots of money for expensive handbags and shoes. We do not. What we earn and what we do goes so far. Yeah. There's just so much, it doesn't just go to our families and our parents and our siblings and our neighbours and our communities. If you just think of the range of people you help and support and how far what you earn goes and how, the impact of it, there's no selfishness there. It goes so far. We're the last people we think of buying expensive handbags and shoes. There's 100 other people that we try to help first. And so that whole thing of, that's another thing that helped me let go of the guilt, was how many doors are we opening? How many paths have we created? Since childhood, we've been doing things for other people. And so that made me think, I'm not here just to earn money. We need to pay the bills, but that's not all I'm doing.
I love that way of thinking. Just not just even in the earning, just our nature. There's a real enabling sense there. Yeah. And actually, that is what makes you so strong as a leader, because I can see that now come across for your teams.
I don't think I've ever met any Muslim woman in the workplace that just goes to work, does her job, go home, go sleep. I don't think I've met anyone. Like, even the most quietest, most unassuming woman in the workplace, she's volunteering somewhere. Half of them are running a charity somewhere. You're a great role model in this. It blows my mind how much, different things you do.
Not at all.
And that's what I see across the board. So amazing. I just think we're not here to earn money. The young man who was saying that, he hasn't got a clue. And that's why we shouldn't feel that guilt. You've made a choice to come to a workplace. Let's just get on with it now.
What an amazing way to think about it. And Ferzanah, I've got one last question. I mean, I've got lots of questions, but I feel like we could go on forever otherwise.
We could chat all day.
If the public sector could do one thing today that would make a huge difference to increasing the representation of Black, Asian, minority ethnic leaders, what would you say would make the biggest impact?
Wow. I think I put a lot of thought into this as part of my master's. So one of the areas I looked at into my master's was what prevents progression, and also a lot of the work we did Pan London, looking at raw data, at what level do people stop. So you could have a view, but then the data tells you something different. So typically across London, we were finding that there was a glass ceiling at kind of lower management, and that's where Black and Asian people were stopping. And my research showed things like, for Asian women in particular, Bengali and Pakistani women in particular, the blocker was a lack of role model. And if you told me 10 years ago what difference does a role model make, I would have said that's not going to make any difference to me. But actually now looking back, it was the fact that I could not see what it looks like for me. I could not understand how a practicing Muslim woman could be in that position, held me back all the way throughout.
Wow.
Every time I did something brilliant, I wouldn't stand next to it. I just would hide. I would literally hide from things. I'd do a great piece of work and I'd hide. And I recognised over time, actually, it's because I didn't know what that would look like. So I think the role modelling bit is really, really big. It feels like a small thing out of all the things you could do, but that's one of the really big things.
Just seeing the representation at the top table.
Yeah. Of what does it look like to have someone like me sit at that table? Does it mean I lose faith? So it was always a thing for me. Does it mean that is there a challenge to my integrity? Is there a challenge to my intensity of my faith? And that's something I'm having to revisit in this role, because my role is so intense now, takes up so much of my headspace. What does that mean for my faith? So it's something I've it's not been an issue for many years, but I've had to revisit now. And what does that mean for me? And so role modelling, it depends on who you're looking at, but for someone like me, role modelling, it ended up being one of the really big ones. And then the other one, like I said, the sponsorship. You might not be good about talking about stuff, but I'm going to tell people that person's brilliant, use them, or say their name in the right place.
Listening to you, I realise how much of an impact, almost taking someone under your wing, but really championing for someone that no one else, or they can't even champion for themselves.
No.
What a difference it makes.
And I've seen it again now. So I've had my my director Mabib Khan, amazing, really interesting. But I learned just watching how he does stuff. Really interesting kind of approach to things. I've learned so much from. But he's another one. He'll say my name in front of politicians. So Ferzanah's doing really good stuff, and I've been great for that. But then I've had our interim chief exec. She saw me speak at some of the Pan London stuff about the UNICEF work I do. And so when she joined us on an interim basis, she came to have a discussion with me. But before she left, really simple thing, but she said to the new chief exec, I want you to meet Ferzanah, make sure you use her properly. And I thought, she didn't have to do that, but she actually does a sponsor on her way out. And she's done that for a lot, she's done that for a lot of people, and a lot of people she's done that for, kind of Black and Asian women, have done really well. So she's a real kind of...
Goodness.
She's really good at it. So I just thought, you know what, pass it on then. Who do I need to do that for? You know, who are the people in the organisation that are brilliant but quietly in the background? Right, I'm going to start taking their names in front of the right people.
I love that. You're going to start a movement here, Ferzanah, because actually it's so easy supporting and enabling people and recognising people that otherwise wouldn't be recognised.
I think where that kind of takes, the one big thing you're talking about is back to where we started, is to get us good at the soft stuff. What can we do to support you? So as part of it is role modelling how you do the soft stuff, the networking, the sponsorship, the allyship, the strategic thinking. How do you get people to step out of the doing into the right? How do I help people to see the good stuff I've done and connect with it and connect with me? So I think it's that soft stuff that many of us, it's taken us longer to get our heads around, because we just thought, if I get another degree and if I do this piece of work really well, someone's going to give me a promotion and that will be it. And then you realise the world doesn't work like that.
I love it. And what I love especially is anyone that I asked that question to stuck to the brief and went with one thing. But because you're Ferzanah, you've given us about 3 things already, and I feel like you still haven't stopped.
I'm mindful of that. Which is the one?
And there's also this, and there's also... But look, honestly, I knew I'd get a lot more than I'd ever expect talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, for being so transparent, for being open about your whole journey, because I know this will resonate with so many people, inspire so many people, and a privilege for me that you've come on and spoken to us.
I've had a lovely time chatting with you. Thank you. Really enjoyed myself.
Thank you, Ferzanah.